was a very unusual press conference. It is focused on one issue only, and that is Xinjiang. And basically, the journalists were locked up in a room and were presented with propaganda videos that they really can't escape from.
What did you make of the Uyghur speakers featured in the video and what they had to say?
Well, it is hard to say whether they're there voluntarily or not, because we know that the Chinese government punished Uyghurs who speak an alternative perspective from what the government wants. So there is a sense of coercion for Uyghurs. So it is hard to tell whether they're there voluntarily.
Do you think China's strategy in combating what it calls disinformation about Xinjiang and the Uyghurs possibly backfired today?
Yes, to the extent that they're targeting this kind of propaganda to people in Australia, I think it is unlikely to sway many people in Australia. Australians have a general distrust towards the Chinese government, so they're really unlikely to see such blatant propaganda as believable.
And of course, these press conferences have been held not only in Australia but other countries. So do you think journalists would be more sceptical about what Beijing tells us after such press conferences?
Well, I think journalists generally has been skeptical from the very start. There's extensive research done by scholars and researchers on human rights abuses in Xinjiang, and the evidence is quite strong that this is happening. So this kind of propaganda is, I will say, unlikely to sway independent journalists, especially in the West.
Well, journalists from our Chinese desk say Uyghur community leaders here are really not happy that Australia allowed the presentation to even take place. What should Canberra's response be?
I'm not sure the details of what happened, but the Chinese embassy has a right to call press conferences. I don't think the Australian government should ban Chinese embassy from holding press conferences or invite journalists. But certainly the Australian government should protect the Uyghurs that's already in Australia and really push back on the messaging from the Chinese government about human rights in Xinjiang.
What did the conference reveal about the vast difference in style of communication between Beijing and the Western world, and how perhaps China should reconsider its approach?
It's quite clear that the Chinese government style of communicating to an Australian audience is not effective, but it's quite possible that they have really no other choice. I mean, it wants to occupy some space on the Xinjiang issue in Australia. So in a way, it must present an alternative view. And there is very little it can do to make the view believable.
Well, China says the offer for the UN to visit Xinjiang has been on the table for a long time, but the UN doesn't seem convinced it will have unrestricted access. What conditions should it be demanding, do you think?
It should definitely demand access to people and to talk to them in private, because we know that people in Xinjiang can be punished for stating their views. So it is ludicrous to have people go in there and talk to these people in front of Chinese officials, that you never get an actual perspective from doing that.
Yunjiang, thank you so much for talking to the world tonight.
Thank you.